One of the perks of being on the board at North Bennett is that we get the privilege, the honor, to introduce the 2025 North Bennett Distinguished Alumni Award. And this year, the award goes to Dan Levitan. So Dan is an author, an instructor, a mentor who is immensely influential in the piano technology field. His generosity, his humility, his decades of dedication to his trade are well known to fellow technicians. Over the course of his nearly 50-year career, Dan has published over 40 articles in the Piano Technicians Journal, the eminent publication of the Piano Technicians Guild. Dan contributed to or was featured in many other articles in the journal and served for many years as its tuning editor. In 2008, he was awarded the Jack Greenfield Award for exceptional writing. His other contributions to the Guild include years as a prominent instructor at national conferences, regional conventions, seminars, chapter meetings across the country, as well as years of service as a certified tuning examiner. In 2021, he was inducted into the Guild's Hall of Fame. His excellence as an instructor has resulted in several international teaching experiences, one of which heavily informed the development of his book called The Craft of Piano Tuning. The book brings a fresh and engaging perspective to the science of piano tuning, and as such has become the definitive resource for the theoretical and practical knowledge in the field. Dan is a lifelong learner. His pursuit of elevating his craft and helping others lead to extensive research in the body mechanics as they relate to piano tuning. And as a result of his research, he has invented and patented a fully re-engineered tuning hammer that reflects both innovation and practicality. All of these accomplishments clearly establish Dan as a distinguished member of our alumni community. And perhaps more meaningful than these accolades is his character. He once navigated the streets of New York City by bicycle to ply his trade, taking equal delight in the service of instruments great and small, old and new, run down and precious. He remains generous with his time, serving as a mentor and a resource for technicians in the local area and far afield. And he is the type of person who is truly deserving of this honor, and he's humble about it. And for all of his accomplishments and talents, we are proud to call him one of our own. So please join me in congratulating Dan Levitan, our 2025 Distinguished Alumnus.
Good morning. To my new fellow alums, to the faculty, the board, the staff, and to our distinguished guests. It's an honor to be here. If I seem a bit nervous, please keep in mind that the experience of a piano technician is generally the better you do your job, the less people notice you. So when I see everyone in this room looking at me, of course, my instinctive reaction is that something is horribly wrong. I'm glad, though, for this opportunity to express my gratitude to you for having made me realize just how much this remarkable institution means to me and how deeply it has become a part of who I am since my own graduation with the class of 1975, nearly 100 years after our founding. Back then, in 1881, the North End was filled with refugees, driven from the old world by deteriorating conditions there. So many had arrived here that conditions in the North End were deteriorating too, to the point that some of the good citizens of Boston took it upon themselves to lend a helping hand. They tried various approaches, doling out charity, advocating for equality in city services, but soon began to focus on enabling North Enders to improve conditions here themselves by giving them access to knowledge. Epistemologists identify two kinds of knowledge: knowledge that and knowledge how. Our founders realized that central to their mission of helping North Enders help themselves was imparting to them knowledge how, teaching them the skills that would enable them to find steady handwork. And that's how we became America's first trade school. It seems quaint today, but our founders considered part of our school's educational mission to be imparting virtues like cleanliness, orderliness, and punctuality that they believed were fundamental both to personal happiness and to strong, healthy communities. Our original building at 39 North Bennett Street happened to be next door to the place we're sitting now, the Old North Church. Famously, the church from whose spire 2 lanterns shone 250 years ago, warning the citizenry that the enemy were on the move. The lantern in our school's seal brings them to mind, but our founders would probably have thought of our lantern less as a beacon of warning than as a beacon of hope, like the lantern in a lighthouse or the Statue of Liberty's torch, a light guiding people to a safe haven. Ironically, I followed that beacon to North End looking not for knowledge how, but for knowledge that. Learning that had always been my strong suit. And since I was, as a result, pretty good at taking tests, I had been drifting more or less passively towards a life of the mind. Then, halfway through college, I had met someone who had graduated the year before from our piano technology program. At that point, the piano was an important part of my life, so I was captivated by the notion of learning more about it. And what better way, I thought, than to take a year off and go to that school on North Bennett Street. Arrived in the North End, I discovered that learning about pianos and piano technology was easy. All you had to do was pay attention to Bill Garlick's lessons and read every book in the library. Most of our time, though, was spent learning how to work on pianos, which I discovered wasn't quite so easy. That felt, that glue, those strings, those unisons, they just wouldn't behave the way I wanted them to. The results were plain for anyone to see. My damper felts weren't cleanly cut. My glue got into places it didn't belong. My tuning pin coils weren't tight. My unisons, unstable. However, I was coming into close daily contact with people for whom those things were behaving. Those were the ones among us whose strong suit was learning how. My work improved considerably when I began to use my hands and the implements in them like those people were instinctively using theirs, not just as tools to manipulate the things we were working with, but also as sensors, to learn about the nature of those things enough to get them to behave by allowing them to behave the way they wanted to behave anyway. Of course, none of us, not even Bill, knew everything there was to know about the world we were working in. Even for him, failure was always possible, and usually unpredictable. Now, I doubt that Bill considered instilling virtues in his students to be part of his mission in training us in piano work. However, the fundamentally unknowable and therefore capriciously arbitrary nature of the work we were doing was every day doing just that. It was encouraging us to be humble, to forgive both ourselves and others, and to react to inevitable setbacks with a sense of humor. To learn, in other words, some of the virtues that are fundamental both to personal happiness and to building strong and healthy communities. Okay, here comes the part of my speech in which I fulfill my contractual obligation to give our new crop of grads a bit of advice. In my 50 years of living a life of the hand, I have observed that the people who are most likely to become masters of my craft aren't necessarily the ones who naturally love their work. The ones who, because their strong suit is learning how, are kept at their benches by the pleasure they take in the act of shaping their materials with their hands and tools. Instead, it's the ones who are driven by a different kind of emotion, closer to hate, a kind of irritation born of the frustration that things aren't the way they're supposed to be, that impels them to return to their benches over and over again until they can't improve their work anymore. I learned early on that no such instinctive impulse drove my piano work. I could force myself to return again and again to the bench, but only so many times. There were, though, aspects of my craft that I found myself returning to over and over again, irritated that they weren't the way they were supposed to be, until I had managed to improve them to the extent I was able. Those aspects of my craft were the gaps in our understanding of it. The satisfaction I felt when I found a way to close one of those gaps was rewarding in a qualitatively deeper way than the satisfaction I felt when I had finished working on a piano, especially once I had found a way to articulate my thoughts so that I could share what I had done with my colleagues. From a financial standpoint, it wasn't the best use of my time. However, because I had found a way to advance my craft that gave me deep satisfaction, I now have an abiding love for it. My advice to you today, then, isn't the standard advice, to do work that you love. Instead, it's to notice an aspect of your work that you are impelled to improve. The feeling of satisfaction you'll get when you succeed at doing that will keep you coming back for more, so that you'll get better and better at what you're doing. And that will make you love your work. I'll close now by observing that the world you're entering as you leave North Bennett Street today is very different from the one my class entered 50 years ago at the dawn of the information age. As all of us are now spending increasingly more time in virtual worlds, untethered from the implacable reality of the real world, it's becoming clear that those worlds, as currently constructed, are encouraging us to be not humble, but vain, not to forgive, but to take umbrage and revenge, to react to inevitable setbacks, not with a kind of laughter that recognizes the fundamental absurdity of the human condition, but with a kind of laughter that dominates and diminishes others through ridicule. In a word, conditions are deteriorating rapidly. The enemy are on the move. We see the consequences every day in the steady stream of refugees from this toxic online environment who arrive at North Bennett Street searching for a way to live that nourishes rather than degrades their essential humanity. In that sense, the lantern on our steel is still a beacon of hope, guiding people to a safe haven. However, I have come to think of our lantern in another way as well, as a lamp in a medieval monastery whose monks are preserving knowledge that, for future generations, by laboriously copying books by hand. That's not because monks are in the habit of taking vows of poverty. Though in a world awash in cash that seems to have no sensible origin, you may sometimes feel that in choosing to practice a craft, you too have taken a vow of poverty. Rather, it's because by transmitting the knowledge how of traditional crafts to our students, we are bringing them into contact with the world in the most direct way possible, and in that way preserving for future generations a way of being in the world that encourages the best in us. Thank you.